On a desolate planet, where the air was thick with dust and the ground was cracked and barren, a human soldier wandered alone. His mission was simple: survey the alien planet and report back. But as he walked through the endless wasteland, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. The planet seemed quiet, almost too quiet, as if something was waiting for him. His boots crunched against the dry earth as he carefully moved forward, his eyes scanning the horizon. The soldier had been on countless missions before, but this planet felt different. The wind howled through the air, carrying with it the scent of something unfamiliar, something wild. Suddenly, a sharp sound cut through the silence, a whistling noise, followed by a blur of motion. Before he could react, a spear shot through the air toward him with terrifying speed. Without thinking, his hand shot out, and he caught the spear just inches from his face. The force of the impact nearly knocked him off balance, but his grip held firm. For a moment, he just stood there, the spear vibrating in his hand, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked up, expecting to see a group of aliens, but instead, there was only one. Standing a few yards away, a tall, imposing figure was watching him with wide, intense eyes. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin was a dark, shimmering shade of blue, and her hair moved like it was alive, floating around her head as if blown by an unseen wind. She wore strange, ceremonial armor that gleamed under the sun, and her stance was one of readiness, as though she had expected this confrontation. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The soldier's mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Who was this alien? Why had she thrown the spear at him? He wasn't sure, but he knew that this was no ordinary encounter. This was something different. The alien warrior did not speak at first. She simply stood there, her eyes locked onto his. The soldier's fingers tightened around the spear, unsure of what to do next. He wasn't here to fight, not unless he had to. He had come to this planet on a peaceful mission, but peace seemed far from possible now. The silence between them grew, stretching on like an eternity. The soldier, still holding the spear, tried to speak. "What do you want?" His voice was steady, but inside, his heart raced. He knew that this encounter could quickly turn dangerous, depending on the alien's intentions. The alien warrior's eyes flickered, and she took a step closer. The soldier could see the muscles in her legs flex beneath the armor as she moved, graceful and poised, ready for whatever might come next. She said something, her voice low and melodic, but it was a language he didn't understand. He took a cautious step back, keeping the spear in his hand. "I don't understand you," he said, hoping his tone would show that he meant no harm. "I'm just here to explore." The alien warrior didn't respond at first. She simply kept her eyes on him, studying him carefully, as if trying to read his every movement. The soldier began to feel the weight of her gaze. There was something ancient in her eyes, something that made him feel small and insignificant, as if he was standing before a creature far older and wiser than himself. Then, without warning, she spoke again. This time, the words were different, slower, more deliberate. The soldier could sense the power behind her voice, even if he couldn't understand the words. It was as though she was giving him a message, but it was lost in translation. Suddenly, the air around them seemed to crackle with tension. The soldier's hand tightened around the spear, his instincts telling him to be ready. The alien warrior took another step forward, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked once more. The world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them standing on this strange alien world. The soldier didn't know what was happening, but he knew that he had just stepped into something much bigger than he had imagined. The spear in his hand was not just a weapon, it was a symbol of something he didn't yet understand. And the alien, this mysterious warrior, was not just an enemy. There was more to her than he could comprehend. The soldier was about to say something else, but before he could open his mouth, the alien made a strange, almost unearthly gesture. She raised one hand, palm outward, and her gaze softened. It was as though she was asking for something, but he couldn't tell what. A strange feeling washed over him, something he couldn't explain. It was as if the bond between them had been forged in that instant, a connection that ran deeper than anything he had ever felt before. He couldn't explain it, but it was there, undeniable. The soldier took a deep breath, still holding the spear. He wasn't sure where this encounter would lead, but he knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The fate of both him and the alien warrior was now tied together in a way he couldn't understand. Whatever had just begun, he was in it for the long haul. The soldier stood there, gripping the spear tightly, his mind racing. The alien warrior's strange gaze lingered on him, as if waiting for something, waiting for him to do something. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary encounter. There was a weight to the silence that seemed to pulse with an energy he couldn't comprehend. The air was thick, and every moment stretched on like it was endless. For the first time in his life, the soldier felt truly small, not in size. He was taller than most humans, stronger than most. No, he felt small in a way that was more profound. It was as though he had just walked into a world far beyond his understanding, a world where the rules were different, and where he was a mere pawn in something much bigger. The alien warrior's eyes never left his face. There was a depth to her gaze, as if she could see through him, past the surface, into the core of his being. He felt exposed, vulnerable. And yet there was no hostility in her eyes, only a sense of quiet power, a force that seemed ancient and unyielding. For a moment, the soldier wondered if he had made a mistake by not reacting faster. If he had thrown the spear back, would he have made things worse? But before he could dwell on that thought, the warrior finally spoke. Her voice was low and musical, filled with something both foreign and familiar. He couldn't understand a word, but the tone was enough to tell him that this was no threat, at least not in the way he had expected. The soldier didn't know what to do. He had come here with one purpose: to explore. But he had never imagined he would encounter an alien civilization, let alone one as powerful as this. He had expected to find desolate land, strange creatures, maybe even hostile environments. But this was different. The alien warrior stepped closer, and the soldier instinctively took a step back, but he couldn't help the curiosity that burned within him. What did she want? Why had she thrown the spear at him in the first place? Was this some sort of test? He had heard stories of ancient rituals, of challenges thrown by warriors to prove their strength, but this felt more than just a test. The warrior's movements were graceful, almost otherworldly. With every step, she seemed to glide over the ground, her armor shimmering in the fading light. Her presence was commanding, yet not intimidating. It was as if the very air around her bent to her will, wrapping her in an aura of unspoken authority. Suddenly, she raised her hand in a fluid motion, her palm open and facing outward. It was a gesture the soldier had never seen before, one that seemed both peaceful and yet filled with power. His breath caught in his throat, unsure of what to do next. He felt an inexplicable urge to lower the spear, to let go of the weapon that had just moments ago saved his life. Her eyes softened, just slightly, but it was enough. There was something about the way she looked at him that made him feel as though they were no longer strangers. The soldier didn't understand what was happening, but he knew one thing. There was more to this encounter than he could grasp. The spear in his hand, the alien warrior in front of him. Everything was connected, tied together by forces he had never imagined. The warrior spoke again, and this time, the soldier thought he heard a word that sounded like bound. The word echoed in his mind, like a soft, haunting whisper. He didn't know why, but it sent a chill down his spine. There was something familiar about the word, as if he had heard it before, in another time, another place, but he couldn't place it. The alien warrior watched him closely, her expression unreadable. She stepped back, moving with fluidity that made it seem like the very air around her responded to her will. The soldier felt the tension building again, but this time, it wasn't from fear. No, It was something else, something he couldn't explain. It was as though the very nature of the world around him had shifted, and the rules had changed. And then, without warning, the warrior's voice grew louder, more insistent. She said something that sounded like a name, but it wasn't his name. It was something foreign, something that seemed to have weight, like a title. As she spoke, the soldier's vision blurred for just a moment, and he felt a strange pull deep within him, a pull toward her, a pull he couldn't resist. It was as though the universe had shifted, and the soldier found himself at the center of something much larger than he could understand. The alien warrior took another step forward, and this time, the soldier didn't back away. Instead, he found himself lowering the spear, his hand loosening around its shaft. The warrior did not reach for it, but her eyes lingered on it, then back to him. He had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. His journey on this planet had just begun, and the bond that had been formed between them, unspoken but undeniable, was the key to something neither of them fully understood. The soldier was bound to her now, bound by forces older than anything he could comprehend. The air around them felt charged, as if the very planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. And so they stood together, two strangers in a world full of mysteries, each uncertain of what would come next, but both feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on them. The journey ahead would be dangerous, but there was no turning back. The soldier followed the alien warrior through the strange terrain, each step feeling heavier than the last. The planet's barren landscape stretched out before them, but now it seemed more alive, more full of hidden meaning. The air hummed with an energy he couldn't explain, and every time he looked over at the warrior, a feeling of unease settled in his chest. What had he just walked into? What was this law she had spoken of? The ancient binding that he had yet to fully comprehend. The warrior led him toward a cluster of tall, jagged rocks in the distance, the remnants of a once mighty structure now long forgotten. As they drew closer, the soldier could see that these were not just natural formations, but the ruins of an ancient city. There were markings on the walls, strange symbols and carvings that seemed to pulse with a faint ethereal glow. The warrior stopped in front of one of the stone pillars, tracing her fingers across the surface. Her eyes were fixed on the carvings as if they held the answers to a riddle that had been waiting for centuries. The soldier hesitated, unsure of what to do. He was a soldier, trained to follow orders, to observe and report. But this was beyond anything he had prepared for. His mind was racing, trying to piece together the fragments of what had just happened. The spear, the bond, the ancient law. He wanted answers, but he didn't know where to start. Finally, the warrior turned to face him, her expression unreadable. She spoke again in that low, melodic language, but this time, he felt something different in her words. There was a weight to them, as if each syllable carried the weight of history, of millennia of tradition. He could feel the force of her words pressing into him, even though he couldn't understand a single one. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the only sound the wind whispering through the ruins. The warrior's eyes softened, and she gestured for him to follow her. With no other choice but to trust her, the soldier took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. She led him into a large stone chamber, the walls covered with more of those strange markings. The air inside was cool, and the faint glow from the carvings illuminated the room in an eerie light. In the center of the chamber stood a large stone altar, ancient and worn by time. The soldier's eyes narrowed as he approached it. He had seen such altars before, in ancient ruins on Earth, but none had ever felt like this. There was a palpable sense of power in the room, an energy that seemed to pulse with life. The warrior turned to him, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and determination. She spoke again, and this time, the soldier could swear he heard the word binding once more, though it sounded different, heavier this time. She knelt before the altar and placed her hand on the stone surface. The glow in the room intensified, and the air seemed to hum with energy. The soldier's instincts screamed at him to step back, but he couldn't move. He was drawn to the altar, to the strange power that radiated from it. The warrior looked up at him, her expression unwavering. She raised her hand and gestured for him to come closer. Reluctantly, he stepped forward, his heart racing. As he approached the altar, the air around him grew thick, charged with an unexplainable energy. It was as if the room itself was alive, breathing, waiting. The warrior motioned for him to kneel beside her, and for reasons he couldn't explain, the soldier obeyed. He knelt next to her, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was no ordinary ritual. No, this was something ancient, something that had been waiting for centuries to be fulfilled. He could feel it in his bones, in the very core of his being. She placed her hand on the altar, then turned to him. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, the soldier felt a connection like no other. It wasn't just physical. It was deeper, something that transcended space and time, as if the universe itself had drawn them together for a purpose neither of them fully understood. Without a word, the warrior reached for his hand and placed it on the altar beside hers. The moment their hands touched the stone, a rush of energy surged through him, filling every part of his body. It was overwhelming, like being struck by lightning, but without the pain. Instead, there was a feeling of clarity, of knowing something deep inside that he had never known before. The soldier's mind raced as images flashed before his eyes. Visions of battles fought long ago, of civilizations rising and falling, of lives lived and lost. And through it all, the warrior's face remained etched in his mind, a constant presence, as though their fates had been tied together long before this moment. The power in the room intensified, and the soldier could feel the bond between them solidifying. It wasn't just a physical connection, it was something far more profound. It was as though the entire planet, the very essence of the world itself, had recognized this union and was affirming it. The soldier's heart pounded in his chest, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He couldn't understand what was happening, but he knew one thing for sure. This bond could not be broken. The warrior's eyes met his once more, and for the first time she smiled. It wasn't a smile of triumph, nor of relief. It was something deeper, something older. It was a smile that spoke of inevitability, of a fate that had been sealed long before either of them had arrived on this planet. The soldier's mind was a whirl of confusion and awe. But deep down, a part of him knew that this was just the beginning. The bond had been forged, and there was no turning back. What came next was uncertain, but one thing was clear: his life would never be the same again. The warrior was now his, bound to him by forces beyond their control, and together they would face whatever came next, whatever challenges this planet and the universe had in store for them. The days following the ritual passed in a haze, and the soldier found himself walking a path he had never expected to tread. The alien warrior, once a stranger whose actions had seemed like nothing more than a dangerous encounter, was now a constant presence at his side. The bond between them, forged in that strange ceremony, was undeniable. Every time their eyes met, he felt an unspoken understanding pass between them, a connection that ran deeper than mere words could convey. But it wasn't just the bond that kept him awake at night. There were other things, other forces at play. As the soldier and the warrior traveled deeper into the ruins, they encountered remnants of a once great civilization. The walls were covered with carvings that seemed to tell a story of an ancient people who had once ruled the planet with power and wisdom. But now, their civilization was crumbling, their knowledge lost to time. The alien warrior was determined to uncover the truth, and the soldier found himself pulled into her quest, unable to turn away. Despite the unspoken bond between them, there was still a gulf between their cultures, one that neither of them could ignore. The soldier, raised in a world of technology and war, struggled to understand the ways of the alien warrior. Her people had lived in harmony with the planet for centuries, their existence tied to the land and the forces of nature in ways he couldn't comprehend. She spoke of things that seemed foreign to him, ancient laws, mystical forces, and rites that had been passed down through generations. It was a world of mysticism and power, a world where strength was not just physical, but spiritual. And yet, for all her wisdom, she was bound by the same law that had brought them together, the law that would tie them for life, for better or worse. The warrior, for her part, seemed conflicted. There was something in her eyes when she looked at him, something that spoke of regret. She had been trained to fight, to lead, to defend her people, but now she was bound to a human soldier, someone she had never chosen, someone from a world that had never understood her people. And yet there was a deep, undeniable pull between them, a force that neither of them could ignore. She had spoken little of the ancient law, but it was clear that it weighed heavily on her. It wasn't just a bond. It was a chain, a tie that bound them both in ways neither of them could break. As they explored the ruins, the soldier began to notice the strange symbols carved into the stone, symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint, eerie glow. He had seen markings like these before, in ancient ruins on Earth, but they had always been cryptic, hard to understand. These, however, were different. There was something alive about them, something that seemed to react to his presence, to their presence. The soldier couldn't explain it, but he felt a strange sensation whenever he came into contact with the markings, as if they were speaking to him, urging him forward. It was during one of these moments, while the warrior studied the symbols, that the soldier felt the first real shift in their relationship. He had always seen her as a warrior, an enemy at first, then an ally. But now, as they stood side by side in the ruins, something changed. The warrior, sensing his thoughts, turned to him with a look of understanding. She spoke in her language, but her voice was softer this time, less forceful. "The law binds us," she said, her words carrying a weight that hung in the air. "But it is not just a law of the body. It is a law of the soul. The bond we share is not just between two people. It is between two worlds." The soldier couldn't help but frown. "What do you mean?" The warrior's gaze softened, her eyes filled with an ancient sadness. "I have spent my life defending my people, following the laws of my ancestors. But now, I am bound to you. I don't understand why it has to be this way. I never wanted this." The soldier was taken aback by her words. For all the strength she had shown, for all the power she radiated, there was a vulnerability in her now, one that mirrored his own confusion. He had never asked for this bond, never chosen it. But as much as he wanted to walk away, to find some way to escape the pull of the ancient law, he knew that wasn't an option. He took a step closer to her, his heart heavy with the weight of their situation. "I didn't ask for this either," he said quietly. "But now that we're here together, maybe we can figure out what it means." The warrior looked at him for a long moment, her gaze searching his face, as if trying to find some sign of hope. Slowly, she nodded. "Maybe you are right. Maybe there is more to this bond than we understand. But I cannot ignore the past. I cannot forget the law that binds me." For the first time since their encounter, the soldier saw a glimmer of uncertainty in her eyes. It was a flicker, brief and fleeting, but it was there. It was as if she was torn between her duty and the strange, new connection between them. And in that moment, the soldier realized that they were both lost in this strange new world, caught between the past and the future, between duty and the unknown. As they continued to explore the ruins, the soldier and the warrior grew closer, not just in proximity, but in understanding. They shared quiet moments where they communicated without words, where the bond between them seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. And yet, the soldier knew that this connection, this bond, was a double-edged sword. It gave him strength, but it also held him captive. They were bound by ancient laws, laws that neither of them fully understood, and there was no telling where this path would lead. But as the soldier looked at the warrior beside him, he knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. They had no choice but to embrace the bond, to trust each other, and to move forward into the unknown. As they ventured further into the ruins, the landscape grew even more alien and surreal. The stone structures they explored seemed to stretch endlessly, their surfaces covered with intricate carvings that glowed faintly in the dim light of the planet's two suns. There was a palpable sense of ancient knowledge embedded in every rock, every corner, as if the very stones themselves were repositories of lost history. The soldier couldn't help but feel a growing sense of awe, mixed with an undercurrent of dread. He wasn't sure what they were meant to find here, or if they would even be able to make sense of what was left behind by the ancient civilization that once inhabited this planet. The warrior was more focused than ever, her eyes constantly scanning the symbols and markings, as though deciphering some long-forgotten code. She moved with a purpose, every step filled with the kind of quiet determination that came from a deep, almost instinctive understanding of her surroundings. He could see the weight of the law on her, the invisible chain that bound them together, pulling her forward, driving her to uncover the truth. Despite the undeniable connection between them, the soldier could still sense a distance in her, an emotional barrier she hadn't yet let down. It was clear she was conflicted, torn between her duty to her people, her ancient laws, and the strange new bond she shared with him. He couldn't understand it fully, but he could feel the tension whenever their eyes met. She was caught between two worlds, and so was he. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow across the landscape, the warrior stopped in front of another set of carvings. These ones were different, more complex, more intricate. They told a story of a powerful ancient ruler, one who had once united the various factions of the planet under a single banner. The soldier felt a strange sense of recognition, as if this ruler's story was somehow intertwined with his own fate. The warrior traced her fingers over the markings, her face a mask of concentration. The soldier, always careful to remain at a respectful distance, watched her, wondering what she was seeing, what she was feeling. Every time she encountered these ruins, she became lost in them, as though the past called to her, whispering secrets only she could hear. Finally, she turned to him, her expression somber. "This is where it began," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is where my people's history is written." The soldier didn't respond immediately. He could tell there was more to this moment than she was willing to say, something deeper that she was struggling with. "What do you mean?" he asked cautiously, stepping closer. "Where did it begin? What happened here?" The warrior's gaze drifted toward the horizon, as if the answer was lost in the fading light. "There was a time when my people ruled this world with strength and unity. But we were not alone. There were others, other races, other civilizations. They came, seeking our power, and we tried to share it. But greed, fear, they consumed everything. The great ruler tried to unite us all, to create a balance. But in the end, it all fell apart." The soldier felt the weight of her words settle on him, heavy and foreboding. This wasn't just the story of an ancient civilization. It was a warning. He couldn't help but wonder what the connection was between this long-lost ruler and the bond he now shared with the warrior. Was it possible that the same forces that had torn apart this world were now at play in their lives? As if reading his thoughts, the warrior turned to him, her eyes sharp. "You wonder what this has to do with us," she said, her voice a mix of frustration and curiosity. I don't know what to make of it, but something tells me that we are walking the same path that the great ruler did. We are bound by the same forces that I don't fully understand." The soldier could see the conflict in her eyes, the struggle between the law that had always governed her life and the unexpected bond she now shared with him. He didn't have all the answers either, but he felt the pull, the sense that they were part of something much larger than either of them could grasp. They spent the night in the ruins, each lost in their own thoughts. The soldier lay on the cold stone floor, staring up at the stars, his mind racing with questions. What was their purpose here? What had happened to this planet? And why did he feel like he was somehow connected to it all? He thought of the warrior, her silent strength, and the way she carried the burden of her people's history. He could see that she was struggling with something deeper than just their bond. It was the weight of her entire civilization, the loss of everything her people had once been. The next morning, the warrior seemed more focused than ever, her eyes bright with a new determination. She led him further into the ruins, deeper than they had gone before. The air was thick with the smell of ancient stone and dust, and the further they ventured, the more oppressive the silence became. It was as if the ruins themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. They reached a massive stone door, covered in more of the glowing symbols. This door was different, larger, more imposing. The soldier felt a sense of foreboding, as though crossing this threshold would lead them into a new chapter of their journey. The warrior approached the door with reverence, her fingers brushing over the markings. A moment passed, then another, as if the door were considering whether to open for them. Finally, with a deep, grinding sound, the stone door slowly began to shift, revealing a dark passage beyond. Without a word, the warrior motioned for him to follow, and together, they stepped into the darkness. The passage was narrow, its walls lined with more carvings, more symbols, all glowing faintly in the dim light. The air was cool, and the soldier felt a strange sensation creeping up his spine as they moved deeper into the heart of the ruins. As they walked, the soldier couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that they weren't alone. The further they traveled, the stronger the feeling became. He glanced over at the warrior, but she was focused on the path ahead, her expression unreadable. She seemed to know something he didn't, as if she had walked this path before, perhaps in another life, or perhaps in the history of her people. The deeper they went, the more the sense of unease grew. It was as if the ruins themselves were alive, watching, waiting for something to happen. And then, just as the passage opened into a vast chamber, the soldier saw it, a figure standing in the center of the room, bathed in an otherworldly light. It was an ancient statue, its features worn and eroded by time, but still imposing. The warrior stopped in her tracks, her eyes widening as she recognized the figure. For the first time since their journey began, the soldier saw fear in her eyes. And in that moment, he knew that they were standing on the edge of something much greater, something far more dangerous than either of them had anticipated. The ancient ruler's gaze seemed to pierce the very fabric of time, as if it had been waiting for them all along. The chamber before them was vast, its walls stretching high into darkness, and the air was thick with a sense of ancient power. The statue at the center, bathed in an eerie light that seemed to pulse from within, loomed over them like a sentinel from a forgotten age. The soldier couldn't shake the feeling that they were intruding on something sacred, something that had been waiting for millennia to reveal its secrets. The warrior, for the first time since their journey began, hesitated, her hand trembling as she reached for his arm. "What is it?" the soldier asked, his voice barely above a whisper, but the warrior did not answer immediately. Instead, her eyes were fixed on the statue, her expression a mixture of fear, reverence, and something darker, something she had yet to share with him. "It's him," she said, her voice soft but tinged with emotion. "The ruler, the one who once united my people, the one whose downfall led to the destruction of everything we knew. And now his spirit, his legacy, remains trapped here. But there's more. There's something about him that I never understood until now." The soldier felt a chill crawl up his spine. There was something unsettling about the statue, something in the way it stood as if it were not just a figure carved from stone, but a reminder of an ancient curse. The warrior's eyes held a fear he hadn't seen before. She took a step forward, and the soldier instinctively followed her, though his every instinct screamed for caution. "It's he, alive?" the soldier asked, his mind racing with possibilities. The statue was ancient, its surface weathered by time, yet it seemed almost too lifelike. The light around it pulsed in a rhythm, as if the stone itself were alive. "No," the warrior replied sharply, but then her gaze softened as she turned toward him. "Not alive in the way we understand it, but his essence remains here. The energy of his rule, of his reign, still flows through this place. And now that we are here, it is awakening. The soldier stepped forward, drawn by the magnetic pull of the statue. As his footfall echoed in the silence, the light around the statue seemed to flicker, as though it were responding to his presence. A low hum filled the chamber, reverberating through the walls, vibrating in his bones. He glanced at the warrior, who now looked torn between awe and dread. "The law," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "It's more than just a bond. It's a connection, a calling. The ruler, his power, his influence, they are intertwined with this place. And now it is reaching for us." The soldier felt his pulse quicken. What had they stumbled upon? The deeper they delved into the ruins, the more it became clear that this wasn't just about an ancient alien civilization. It was about something far more dangerous, something tied to their very existence. The warrior seemed to sense his unease, and she reached out, her hand brushing his. "We are not alone here," she said, her voice urgent. "The ruler's spirit, his will, they are tied to the land. And now we've disturbed it. We've awakened something that should have remained dormant." Before the soldier could respond, a deep guttural sound echoed through the chamber. The statue's eyes, which had seemed fixed in place, began to glow faintly, and the light surrounding it grew brighter, more intense. The temperature in the room dropped, and the soldier's breath became visible in the air. The hum intensified, vibrating the very stones beneath their feet. The warrior took a step back, her eyes wide with fear. "It's him," she whispered. "The spirit of the ruler is awakening. It's calling to us." The soldier's heart pounded in his chest as he looked at the statue. Was it possible that this ruler, long dead, was somehow reaching out to them? That his power still lingered, waiting for someone to claim it? A chill ran down his spine as he realized that their bond, this mysterious law that tied them together, might be more than just a relic of an ancient culture. It might be the key to something far more dangerous. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the walls seemed to shift as though the very ruins were alive, reacting to the energy in the air. The soldier reached for his weapon instinctively, but the warrior stopped him with a quick motion. "No," she said, her voice fierce. "Weapons will not help us here. We need to understand what we've awakened, not fight it." The soldier nodded, reluctantly lowering his weapon. He trusted the warrior, even though he didn't fully understand what was happening. Together, they stood in the center of the chamber, staring at the glowing eyes of the statue, waiting for whatever was about to unfold. The hum grew louder, more insistent, and the soldier could feel it in the pit of his stomach. It wasn't just sound. It was energy, raw and unfiltered. He could feel the air crackling around them, like the very fabric of reality was stretching, ready to snap. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the sound stopped. The chamber fell into an eerie silence, and the light around the statue dimmed. The soldier blinked, trying to adjust to the sudden shift. What had just happened? Was it over? The warrior stepped forward slowly, her eyes never leaving the statue. "It's not over," she said softly, her voice strained. "This is just the beginning. The ruler's spirit is not at rest. It wants something. It wants us to take his place." The soldier felt his blood run cold. "Take his place? What do you mean?" She turned to face him, her expression grave. "The law, the bond. It's not just about us. It's about power, about the ability to control this planet. The ruler, he tried to unite everything, to control the forces that governed life and death here. But he failed. His spirit is trapped, and now it is seeking someone else to finish what he started." The soldier could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. The ruins, the bond, the spirit of the ruler. It was all leading to something. But what? "There's no turning back," the warrior said quietly, her eyes locking with his. "We have already crossed a line. We are part of this now." And then, with a sharp intake of breath, she reached for his hand, her grip firm and resolute. He didn't pull away. Whatever lay ahead, Whatever trials awaited them in the ruins and beyond, he knew one thing for certain: they were in this together. The bond had been forged, and there was no escape now. The spirit of the ruler was awakening, and it was calling to them both. The air in the chamber grew thick with tension, and the soldier could feel the pulse of power emanating from the statue. The hum that had filled the room earlier had now faded into a low, almost imperceptible vibration, like the world itself was holding its breath. The warrior's grip on his hand tightened, her body tense as she stared at the statue, her eyes searching for something he couldn't see. The silence that had followed the awakening of the spirit felt oppressive, like a storm waiting to break. For a moment, neither of them moved. The soldier's mind raced, trying to piece together everything that had happened. The bond between them, the strange law that tied them, the ruler whose spirit now seemed to call out to them. It was all too much to grasp in the fleeting moments since they had entered the chamber. He glanced at the warrior, who looked like she was battling an internal storm. There was a deep fear in her eyes, but there was also something else, something stronger: determination. "I don't understand," he said, breaking the silence. "What does the ruler want from us?" The warrior's gaze shifted toward him, her expression a mixture of conflict and resolve. "He wants us to take his place," she repeated, her voice quieter this time, but no less intense. "He wants us to finish what he started, to wield the power that he could not. But it comes with a price. It always does." The soldier's stomach churned. The weight of her words settled on him like a stone, and the more he thought about it, the more it felt like a trap. The ruler's spirit was offering them power, but what would it cost? The warrior had already told him that her people's history was one of destruction and betrayal. Was this the legacy they were meant to inherit? Was this their fate? The warrior took a deep breath, her eyes closing for a brief moment, as if steeling herself for something. When she opened them again, the soldier saw the vulnerability beneath the hardened exterior. "I have lived my life following the law," she said, her voice softer now. "But I don't know if I can follow it any longer. This bond between us, it's changing me. It's changing us. And I don't know what that means for our future." The soldier stepped closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "We don't have to do this," he said. "We don't have to take this power. We can leave, find another way." But the warrior shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with an ancient sadness. "I wish it were that simple," she whispered. "But this power, it's not something you can simply walk away from. The law has chosen us. It has bound us together for a reason. And now, the ruler's spirit is reaching for us. I can feel it, deep within me. I don't know what will happen if we refuse, but I fear it will be worse than anything we can imagine." The soldier swallowed hard. He could see the fear in her eyes, but there was something else there too, something that spoke of a responsibility she could not escape. The bond between them had already been forged, and there was no turning back. They had crossed the threshold, and whatever came next, they would face it together. But the thought of wielding the ruler's power, of becoming part of the same destructive legacy, made him hesitate. Was that truly the path they were meant to walk? Before he could voice his doubts, the statue seemed to respond once more. The light around it flared brightly, illuminating the chamber in an unnatural glow. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and a voice, low and echoing, as though from the depths of the earth, filled the room. "Embrace your destiny," the voice intoned. "You are the chosen. The power of the ancients flows through you. The bond is unbreakable. You will lead, and you will conquer." The soldier's breath caught in his throat. The voice was not of a living being, but of something ancient, something far beyond their understanding. The ruler's spirit was speaking directly to them, urging them to take his place. The warrior's expression tightened, her fists clenched at her sides. "This is what I feared," she said, her voice low and fierce. "This is the curse of my people's legacy. The ruler's spirit cannot rest until someone takes his mantle, until someone claims his power. But that power, it corrupts. It consumes. It destroyed my world once, and now it seeks to claim us." The soldier could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him, but there was no time to consider the alternatives. The chamber seemed to close in around them, the walls vibrating with the energy that filled the air. He glanced at the warrior, her face a mask of struggle and defiance. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the growing hum. "We must choose," she replied, her voice steady, but her eyes filled with uncertainty. "We must choose whether to accept the power and risk becoming what the ruler was, or to reject it and risk losing everything. The bond that binds us, the law that ties us. It is not just a promise, it is a test of who we are and who we will become." The soldier closed his eyes, trying to center himself, to understand what was at stake. The path ahead was uncertain, and the choices they made now could alter the course of their lives forever. They had already crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. The warrior's fate, his own fate, was intertwined with the spirit of the ruler. A sudden, sharp crack of energy split the air, and the soldier felt a surge of power flood through him. The ground beneath them shifted, and for a moment he could see flashes of the ruler's past. The wars, the power, the destruction. It was overwhelming, a flood of ancient memories crashing over him like a tidal wave. His body trembled as the spirit's power sought to claim him, to merge with him, to make him part of its legacy. But in that moment he felt something else, a pull from the warrior at his side. She was strong, her presence grounding him, even as the ruler's spirit reached out to them both. They were bound, but not just by the law. There was something deeper between them now, a connection that went beyond the bond of destiny. The warrior's voice broke through the chaos in his mind. "We are not the ruler," she said, her words fierce and clear. "We are not here to repeat the mistakes of the past. We will not let this power destroy us." With a final, desperate cry, the soldier and the warrior joined forces, their hands clasping together. The energy in the room surged, but instead of surrendering to it, they resisted. The spirit of the ruler howled in fury, its power clashing against their defiance. The chamber seemed to shake, the ruins themselves groaning under the strain. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the light flickered and dimmed, the hum of power fading into silence. The soldier and the warrior stood, breathing heavily, their bodies trembling with the remnants of the energy that had flooded through them. The statue loomed before them, but its eyes were dim now, no longer glowing with the power that had once consumed it. They had made their choice, and in that moment, they knew the journey was far from over. But together, they had faced the ruler's spirit, and they had emerged stronger, united, and determined to forge their own destiny. The power that had once threatened to consume them now lay dormant, its curse broken, its influence faded. The ruins around them were silent once more, and the soldier knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, as they always had been meant to.